Welcome to Arts for the Health of It, a podcast where you will discover creative ways to improve your health and well-being. Someone may have told you that art isn't for you, but they were wrong. Anyone can create arts for the health of it. No talent or experience necessary.
I'm just a little songbird, try to fly my way homeward with the melody, and I make the beat. Don't know where it'll take me, cause when I'm in the dark of night, I sing my way back to the light. Come along with me and your heart will see that a song changes everything. Oh, oh, oh.
Oh my gosh, I don't even really know what just happened, but it was so much fun.
I'm out of breath. I am bleeding, and you'll find out why later. I'm like a little bit embarrassed, but also from laughing and smiling, my jaw hurts.
I know. I feel like it smells so much. Like my jaw is sore. We just had the most fun time with Army. Wow, I can't even talk now. With Frankie.
I felt like I was in a war.
With Frankie Armstrong. She's a voice leader and a singer and a workshop leader out of the UK in Wales. And Richard will tell you more about her in a minute. But you have to she has just some amazing nuggets. She was a social worker for a long time and saw the application of music to open people up and help people feel more seen and connected with others. She talks a little bit about social prescribing that's happening in the UK and some people in her network that are involved with working with people with different health challenges. And then she uses music and movement to help break down people's inhibitions and help them explore their voices. Because Richard, there's some
everybody can sing.
Yes, exactly. I've taught you well.
Otherwise, and I also cannot wait. If this is the first episode of our podcast that you're tuning into, hold on. This is the Arts for the Health of It podcast. I am your host, Richard Wilmore.
And I'm Constanza Rader.
I would describe Frankie Armstrong as a hoot. That would be her only bio on her website. It would just be like, I'm Frankie Armstrong. I'm a hoot.
Oh my gosh.
It was, I don't even know what happened. I feel bad for Ivan, who has to edit the whole thing. The noises that came out of all of us. I don't even know, but it was such a good, it was really, once you get over that, and you're watching yourself. So as we're doing this, it's not even just I feel weird doing this. You get to watch yourself feel weird in this camera on our computer. So I'm like, well, this is weird. But once you get over that, it's so fun.
It was so fun. And if you're listening to this podcast, you should definitely check out this episode on our YouTube channel because it's pretty wild.
We talk about, yes, it was sort of like a circus. There was some trapeze art. There was dancing. It was everything. So Frankie Armstrong, thank you so much for joining us for this. So she began singing for peace and justice causes at the time of the Vietnam War, and she's also known for traditional ballads and songs which illuminate women's lives. She's made 12 solo albums and appeared on numerous shared and themed recordings. She has co-written 3 books and contributed chapters to 11 others. From her belief that singing creates a sense of community and life fulfillment, she began running workshops 45 years ago to help people find their voices. And at age 80, she continues to be engaged in this work. At age 80, and she led us through 20 minutes of craziness, and I was out of breath within 80 seconds. And her at 80, flew through this. It was insane. So I don't want to, I need to catch my breath. So I'm going to stop talking and let you listen to this interview with Frankie Armstrong.
And Frankie's joining us from Wales today, correct?
Yes. Yeah, from our front room in Wales.
Well, thank you for being here.
I mean, you've been doing this for a little while. You've been sort of, before it even was I mean, you've been doing workshops for what, 45 years?
Yes, coming on to my 46th.
I mean,
Wow.
how did it start? Tell us. I really want to get to the body, breath, and voice preparation thing. I want to spend as much time on that as possible. So I don't want to take up your entire day, but I want to hear all about you in 45 seconds. Go.
Well, I'm going to take it back a little bit before we get to the workshops, because I always loved singing. I sang with what we called a skiffle group, which we did American folk songs and Carter Family and blues. And then we changed in the early 60s to a British, singing British songs at the time at which, the folk revival of the 60s happened in Britain. And we said, wonderful as all these American songs are, we actually have our own history in
Imagine that.
Yep. So, and then I was lucky to meet some of the leading lights and sing with the leading lights of that second folk revival: Ewan MacColl, Louis Killen, Bert Lloyd, Peggy Seeger. And so I was just lucky enough because I love going around, and folk clubs started mushrooming, and they started offering me money to go and sing at them. So I really had to kind of, what's my fee? I'll have to make one up. So at that point, I was singing with one of the few professional folk singers, Louis Killen. So I just halved his fee to go on my own. So anyway, so it meant I got involved, through a whole number of ways with community festivals, folk clubs. And then got invited in 1972 to the Mariposa Folk Festival in Canada. It was the very famous one because Joni Mitchell and who else was it? Somebody else gate crashed it. It was... but I wasn't particularly famous, but it was my first chance. And as a result of being at that festival, I heard Ethel Rame and her group of women singing Eastern European songs. Now, I had already an absolute passion for them because Bert Lloyd, A.L. Lloyd, who was a folk song collector as well as an ethnomusicologist, a friend of Bartok's, made recordings, did radio programs. He was one of my great mentors, and he brought out the folk music of Bulgaria on disc in 1964. So, and I'd worn it thin. I mean, that was in a way where I started aspects of the workshops, because I'd been exploring my voice in relation to British traditions, particularly the women who'd been recorded back in the 40s, 50s, even earlier, who had exciting, quite often quite raw voices, which I loved. And then these Bulgarian women, and I was in a funny little miserable bed-sitting room in London, and I was just trying out, how do they do that? How do they make that sound? Where do you have to think of, putting your vocal attention, and how do you breathe? And so I started my own workshops, particularly playing around with the women of Bulgaria. So when I went to Mariposa and heard, and this group was, Ethel's group was called the Penny Whistlers. They were very well thought of back then, in the late 60s, 70s. And to stand in front of these 6 Eastern European, well, in origin, Eastern European, many of them from New York, as is Ethel. But, you know, I just, my hair stood up on end, my spine went buzz, buzz, buzz. And, you know, it had done that on the recordings, but there I was, you know, in this tent near Toronto, and with this visceral response to these amazing women. So I then went and spoke to Ethel, who was the leader of the group, and it turned out she got some of my albums.
Oh,
Wow.
that's exciting.
So she loved my singing of British folk songs, right? So when I was then Kenny Goldstein, who was then professor of folk music at Penn State, met me at Mariposa and invited me to go to the Philadelphia Folk Festival the following year in '73. So, I mean, when I look back on that, I was still pinching myself and saying, you know, how can I be here, you know, being invited to do all these amazing things? But just standing up and singing, that's all I did. I just sang songs I loved and people invited me back. So anyway, so the next year I went to Ethel's workshops in New York, when I was in New York, in Philadelphia, when I was in Philadelphia, because she lived in Philly, but traveled up and down to New York. And we were both at a week-long fight, or maybe it was 2 weeks, folk life festival called Sweets Mill in California. And so I went to lots of her workshops. And that year, the next year, for several years, every year when I came over and did some touring in universities, folk festivals, coffee houses in America, I would find out where Ethel was. You know, we'd plan all this ahead of time to be sure I'd get to some of her workshops at some point on my trip around the States. And yes, I mean, I was still a part-time social worker at that point. Was I a full-time social worker? Anyway, my holidays, where I got the energy from, I have no idea. Of course, from singing. I mean, that's why I'm with you, really, because I found, despite the fact that I was working as a social worker, I got decent holidays, much better than you poor Americans. I was so shocked when I discovered how little holiday. I would have 5 weeks holiday. So I could come over to America for a month. I could nip over to Sweden or Germany or somewhere else for, you know, a long weekend or a week, and then be back at work on the Monday.
Wow.
After that. So talk about my first-hand experience of how singing provided me with the energy, whilst I was losing my sight, to still, have the passion and the delight of, I mean, the traveling wasn't always fun, but no matter whenever I got to where I was going and did the singing or the teaching, then I knew why I'd put myself through the delights of British public transport.
Starting the workshop
and flying and whatever. So anyway, I came back on 1975 yet again, saying to friends what a wonderful time I'd been having at Ethel Rame's Balkan workshops. You know, and by which time I had quite a number of songs that I'd learned. And friends said to me, who had a little kind of mostly singing British songs, but nevertheless, you know, my enthusiasm said, "Oh, that sounds wonderful. Could you do one for us?" And I said, "Sure." And they said, "Oh, invite some more of your friends and other singers, many of which we knew in common." But because I was doing social work and youth work too, I had all kinds of connections that I invited people along who'd never sung in public or in a group ever before, but who trusted that I wasn't going to land them in some horrible situation. I said, it's just going to be fun. I'm just going to do the same kind of fun things that Ethel did with us, just hey and ee and just playing around with our voices. Nobody's got to get anything right. It doesn't matter, if you're not singing absolutely in tune, nobody's going to stare at you. It's not that kind of event. And so I did in July 1975, the first workshop, thinking it was one off.
And here we are, 46 years later.
Nearly 46 years later, yes.
Were you using Zoom back then too?
Sorry?
Were you using Zoom back then too for your workshops?
I had not computers were completely foreign territory to me. So, I mean, forget about Zoom. Zoom has only come into our lives since last April.
It's true. It hasn't been around.
So all of these were actually always sitting in circles. I would always insist, even if we were a wobbly circle, that we sit so we could see each other. I mean, I couldn't necessarily see them, but they could see each other. And for me, that was absolutely crucial for the kind of workshop I wanted to run. And that had always been the way I'd seen Ethel run workshops. If it was with 50 people in a big hall, or it was 10 people sitting by a lake at the Sweets Mill Festival, we'd be in a circle. And it just seemed to me to be so absolutely central to the kind of experience. And as a social worker too, because the first workshop of Ethel's that I went to, a women's workshop in New York, I was a social worker and I was a singer. And there, these women all arrived, from the underground, having worked for the week up until then. And then arrive, oh God, the traffic's terrible, or the underground was so crowded, whatever. And then we would spend 2 hours, 2.5 hours, I can't remember, singing with Ethel. And it was so evident that at the end we were all bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, all that stress of the travel, of the week's work for most of them. Most of them weren't professional singers, but who loved the style of singing and Ethel's way of teaching. So it was the two bits of me, the social worker and the singer, that went, wow, this is such a wonderful way of working. And these songs are so energizing and so beautiful.
I love that image of everyone just sitting in a circle together and singing together and just enjoying the experience of using their voices. It just, I think our ancestors, that's how music making used to be. And
Absolutely.
You would have a song leader, someone maybe with maybe a little bit more skill, but everyone participated in music making and making rhythm and sounds. And we've really, in Western culture, we've kind of outsourced music making to professionals. And I love this idea. You're kind of democratizing music again. I don't know if that's the right term, but you're kind of like bringing it back to the people. And so I'd love to hear maybe a little bit more about the shifts that you see in people, because you were trained as a social worker. And, the research coming out now around singing, especially group singing, is that it has really powerful impacts on our health and well-being. Absolutely. And so you're getting to see that in person. Anyway, I'm just curious to see more from your observations of kind of the shifts that you've seen happen in your workshops.
Well, I could see well enough then when Ethel's first workshops, just to tell the people's body language and mine. But, I was having a good time. They were having a night off from work, So, however, the shoulders were slumped, the chin was down, they arrived. By the time we'd been singing, for half an hour, I could just experience mine and their body language changing, the eye contact. Even, I used to be brilliant at eye contact, even when I couldn't see people.
Wow.
I could hone in exactly. I can't now because one ear was damaged, so it's very much more difficult for me now. I often look in the wrong place and have to ask people to wave their feet at me because that's what I have to do all kinds of eccentric things to function these days, but I can still do it, I hope.
Yeah.
But it was so clear. So when the information started to come in, 15 years ago, about all the impact on the brain, the hormones, the chemicals, the oxytocin, about them all. It wasn't a surprise, really.
Mm-hmm.
I thought, well, obviously something goes on when you sing, and especially when you sing together, something happens, in that space that impacts on us all, the inside and the outside. I mean, I think singing of all events is, well, I think of it, the image of the cross was way before Christianity and used in all kinds of ways, because you've got the vertical, which is you connected to the ground and the sky and your voice that comes through you. And then you've got the horizontal, which is the collectivity of the sounds. So, it seems to me it's the perfect activity, because if you're dancing together, that's wonderful, but you can't all touch each other at the same time in the way that your vibrations do. So it's a unique activity that humans must have developed. Well, Oliver Sacks has said at least 50,000 years, but the more we hear about fossils being discovered, the more indication is that people were doing art of various kinds way earlier than 50,000 years. Mm-hmm. So all we're doing is tapping into something that our ancestors were much brighter and wiser and knew was good for us.
They had a little more insight when they had a little more time on their hands, and they had probably more than 5 weeks of vacation time of holiday.
Absolutely. What was it? Origins, Leakey and Lewin, who did live with hunter-gatherers for a while, said that in order to provide the means of livelihood, a roof, food, and sustenance, sleep, they worked for 18 hours a week on average, hunter-gatherers.
Wow.
I mean, different times of the year was in different cultures was probably different, but they had a lot of time for culture.
Oh, that's imagine
why you have to join an arts and health nonprofit to get that in
as part of your workday.
Yes, those in the nonprofit sector know that 18 hours is a work day and not a work week. So you gotta fit it in with your job.
Well, and in the UK, they're starting to do social prescribing for people, where doctors can prescribe different social and cultural activities for patients to combat things like isolation and to promote health. Do you know much about? I know it's a newer program still in the UK, but could you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, I mean, quite a lot of people, because we have the Natural Voice Network, and quite a lot of the people involved in that are doing singing for people with singing for breathing, particularly for people with COPD. And that's been being researched for a long time with some of our teachers who trained in doing that. There's people working with people with Parkinson's and yes, particularly isolation, anxiety, depression. And I mean, I used to do that because I was a social worker back when I started in 1975. I got invited to do quite a lot of work in mental health areas and disability because I had a lot of contacts with people in those fields. So, I worked in mental health day centers, in various organizations that did arts for people with special needs in some form, so particularly mental health. I went into psychiatric hospitals, acute wards in psychiatric hospitals. So it was evident, right from back then, the 70s, that this was, I remember one group in an acute psychiatric ward where all I got people to do after some gentle, humming and gentle breathing was to say, it would be lovely first to hear all your names. If you could just sing us your names. That's all we need. And then we can sing back to you. And in the process of that, there was an Irish man called Michael, so I'm not giving anything away, who just sang, Michael. And we sang, Michael. And the nurses afterwards said they'd never seen him smile like that before. Just to hear his name sung back to him. So I knew from all kinds of indices that I was doing something that was so simple and yet so precious. And that's just how, because I was one of the few people doing that, that was how I just got to the point where, that became my livelihood, because I got so many invitations to run workshops because of the impact that was. So it's wonderful. I do have to say, the bit of me that is not in love with our current government knows that they have twigged to the fact that it's economically much more sensible to have something like social prescribing, having to provide both the drugs and CBT or whatever, for depressed people. But I like to think that the feedback they'll get, will encourage further social prescription prescribing. So, it may be economically viable, but it's also much more socially viable for many people than individual prescribing.
Oh my gosh, that story of Michael hearing his voice sung back to him, it reminds me of one of my favorite quotes is by author Arne Garberg, and he says, "To love a person is to learn the song that is in their heart, and then to sing it to them when they have forgotten." And that idea that there's this, I think, in reflecting back what we see in each other is a way that to love each other, to say like, I see you and I love you and I care for you. And what a beautiful, simple, like you said, but really intimate and precious way to do that. That's stunning. I love that.
Yeah, no, I agree. I just think it produces such a sense of communion. You don't have to know anything about the people there. You get to know over time if it's an ongoing group, but it's not essential. If people come willing to explore their voices together and to play together and to be willing to forget embarrassment and self-consciousness and all the things that in a way get in the way. And that's why, I think as much of what we're all doing is to do with the psychology and helping people to break through the things that inhibit them. I see that as my primary job. And once you've got people relaxed and willing to go for it, then nearly everybody with a bit of help can sing in tune and enjoy it and stop, being self-critical, all those judgmental things that get in the way.
Are you hearing this, Richard?
I'm listening.
He's skeptical. And you have an activity for us to kind of lead us through a little bit of, like, give us a little taste of this breath and voice work, right?
Yes, I will have to ask Darian because I like to stand up to do that.
All right.
Are we supposed to stand up too?
It means we move the computer and the camera over onto the shelf.
Sure.
We'll take a break and be right back.
This is if we had commercials, this is where it would be.
My way into voice is through the body and the imagination. Yep. So we're going to start imagining you are a beautiful cat.
Oh, good.
And you are waking in a pool of sunshine and yawning and stretching with that lovely sensual pleasure. And rippling your spine.
Are we adding sound?
Yes, yawning.
Oh,
You're yawning.
Okay, yawning. Okay.
If we're a cat, can I have a hairball? Sorry, Ivan, for all of these noises.
Lovely. And now we're changing the image. You're now a cute little puppy dog. You've been splashing around in the sea and you've just jumped out onto the sand. And the first thing you do is lightly panting, taking everything back paws, front paws, off, and wag your tails. Lovely.
Oh my God, I'm out of breath.
And then I might take you through, I won't do the whole sequence because obviously it will take much longer, but something to just get us grounded, to really feel the earth under our feet. So just some way of rolling over our feet, swaying, just ground, so we really feel connected to the ground, and making sure your knees aren't stiff and locked. So what I call ease in the knees. I have lots of mantras, and then I'll do various other gentle shakies, stretchy things, and then I'm going to turn us into seaweed. Okay?
Do it.
So, there's lots of different things I do, but I just thought, so you just have to imagine you're this lovely, bubbly, soft seaweed just floating down through the beautiful, clear, fresh water. And you, on the seabed, you meet lots of other seaweed beings, and it's a lovely day, so you're going to have some seaweed conversations.
Oh.
It's a lovely day, but I've got to teach you seaweed first.
Oh.
Seaweed is bubbly and burbly and chuckly. So bubbly. So seaweed goes. So I might say, like, what a lovely day, isn't the sun shining in the water beautiful? Something like that in seaweed would go. And you would reply. So you see, you all speak seaweed perfectly. And I get people in the group life or moving around or on Zoom, I get people smiling and waving at each other or winking at each other while they talk Seaweed. And then we go to more bubbly and vigorous Seaweed, but we finish up. I have to tell you that you are Seaweed off the coast of southern Spain. So you are Andalusian Seaweed, which means you have a passion for flamenco. And it's now Seaweed flamenco practice. So because you're Seaweed, you can't quite get that wonderful, upright, proud, but you can do your best. So we all just play. So it goes something like, remembering all the time you're just waving, moving, nothing angular, nothing harsh. So, yeah.
They feel like one of those things outside of a used car lot.
Normally I have a rattle. I didn't think we might be doing this, but if I go wee, right, then I do various other things, but one of the things to soften the jaw. Oh, I love being a monkey. We'll be a monkey too. We're a monkey. We've been walking through the forest, and then we come across our favorite tree, a mango tree. And there's lovely ripe mangoes, but we're too small to reach them. So we've got to shake the bottom branches. So with everything soft and loose, your jaw completely floppy. And lo and behold, you've got the biggest, juiciest mango you've ever had. So this is going to help you. There's method behind this madness. This is going to help your jaw muscles, which are one of the muscles we tighten so easily. Jaw muscles, tongue, lips, chin. So the more slurpy the sounds while you eat your delicious mango, the more, just any suitable monkey sound. So off we go. And then with your tongue, lick all. And then the biggest rubbing of your tummy and the biggest sigh of contentment. And so on. And then I'm just going to send sounds. Darian's with us, so he's playing his role too. So I'm just going to send you various sounds, the kind of sounds you might hear in a playground or people gossiping in the backyard. So it's just call response, like the children's game Copycat, right?
All right.
So here we go. Oh ho!
Oh ho!
Woohoo!
Woohoo!
Ha ha!
Ha ha!
Ho!
Oh.
Ha ha ha
Ha!
Oi oi!
Oi,
Oi, oi!
Oi oi!
Oi, oi!
Yippee!
Yippee!
Uh-oh!
Oh!
Ha ha ha!
Ah ha ha!
Yeah!
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah!
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah!
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah!
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah!
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Ho ya la la yeah!
Ho la la, yeah.
Come on, Maya!
Come on, Maya.
Great. Now, so more of that kind of nonsense. And what I discovered probably fairly early on, but the most important thing that I discovered was that if people didn't think they were, quote, singing, they could pitch remarkably well. I did a lot of workshops, where at least half the people would have said, oh, no, I was told I couldn't sing. I'm tone deaf. I was told to go to the back of the class and just mouth. But what I discovered was that if you did something like I make up languages. I love making up sound. So if you did something like "Oh, je m'asie carayo,"
Oh, John.
I don't know.
yeah, I'll do it again.
I'm not
Oh,
fluent.
m'asie carayo.
Oh, Jomoji Choroyo. Something like that.
Yeah, perfect. So, of course, and I discovered that, people who'd been told since they were knee-high that they couldn't sing could hear those pitches perfectly because they didn't think they were singing.
Yes.
So what I learned to do was to start sneaking held notes and then turning them just from kind of what you call conversational chant notes to sung notes. So people would say to me, Frankie, you snuck singing up on me.
How dare you?
I love this so much, Frankie, because I've done quite a bit of study in voice pedagogy and working on pitch matching. Like it's brain science, right? So you're taking, so when we're singing, we're trying to develop a motor pathway for singing. But if that motor pathway is not helping you get to singing, if you hijack another motor pathway of speech, something that they're used to using all the time, and then you can start edging over and start building a new motor pathway to teach someone how to sing. That a lot of people that think that they're tone deaf or they can't sing, it's just because they haven't developed the motor pathway that they need that when they think that they're singing, they can actually, their voice does what they want. So it's brilliant brain science. Like you're kind of hijacking a different motor pathway to teach them. I love it. It's so great.
Well, then what I'll do is add in some more imagination and movement. And in a way, this has become my trademark, my leitmotif, if you like, which is working in the fields. So, and this was, again, just pragmatism, because I moved the workshops into a dance studio, the weekly workshops I was doing in London, and there were no seats at all. So it was tiring, either just standing or sitting on the floor. So I developed just, doing more movement, dances, simple dances, stimulating work. So working in the fields, as I say, is the Armstrong leitmotif. And so what I do after I've been doing the kind of back and forth call response gossiping, then I'll say, now we've turned into the people of a village before agricultural machinery has arrived. So, and in fact, when I was on holiday at a farm when I was about 10 with my parents, I did go and do some haymaking with them. So we're going to do some haymaking, pitchfork, we've got something that we can just toss the hay with to get the sunshine and the breeze to it. So
Winnie has other ideas for you, Richard. The cat is going to be involved in the haymaking.
Richard's head and shoulder.
I think.
what the cat is.
Okay.
Oh, Darian just explained what.
It's like a parrot on my shoulder.
If I came right up here, I might be able to see it.
There's a wagging tail there.
Is there a wagging tail? Oh, yes. I can just see the tail.
Don't know what's happening. She has hijacked the whole thing. And
never perform with animals or children.
This is my life. I don't know why I'm single.
Hilarious.
All right, we're making hay.
Okay.
I never thought a podcast could be such fun. So, are you up to do it with the help of the cat? Are you up to doing a bit of gossiping in
do
the
it.
fields? Because we're going to start work, but I'm going to start by my calls are going to be about some rather scandalous gossip down my end of the village that you're all dying to hear.
Oh
right?
my.
So you'll repeat what I tell you, but with that, I thought so. I was pretty sure that's what was going on, right? So to start with, the movement is just simply, again, contact the earth, the ground. Yeah, lovely, knees nice and soft. And I will go forward and back and forward and back, and lo and behold, everybody joins me. And then I'll start. Hojala mamia,
Hojala mamia,
Ishkamanusko,
Ishkamanusko.
Yeah, we'll let, yeah. Sorry, that's my fault, because of course there's the time gap. So we'll just leave you. When we're doing it with people who are muted, I do the call and then we answer it for people to join.
Oh, we can do that. Here, we can mute ourselves. We can mute ourselves so you can lead this for people that are listening.
Okay. Well, you've done a bit of both, so you could mute yourselves and then I call, and then Darren and I do the same thing for you to join us. Yeah.
Okay. Sounds good. We'll mute ourselves for a second then.
Yeah. And that
Go
also,
for it.
You can do your own variation. It doesn't have to be the same. You can harmonize. And I always say in workshops, look, if you don't get the same note as me, unintentionally, it absolutely doesn't matter, because I can promise you somewhere in the world it would be an acceptable harmony.
That's awesome.
So there's no such thing as a bum note. Okay, so you're going muted, yes?
Yes, ma'am.
Yep. Hora mamayo. Hora mamayo. Ikamanushko. Ishkamanushko. Hoshkabareya. Hoshkabareya. Nekamanushko. Nekamanushko. Zala mamaya. Zala mamaya. Maya meshko. Maya meshko. Maya mulo. Maya mulo. Mulo manera. Mulo manera. Nera maneshka. Nera maneshka. Hoshkayero. 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 Hoshkare. Hoshkare. Re manaya. Re anaya. Holale. Holale. Iyale. Iyale. Ho-hio. Ho-hio. Wee.
Woo! You tricked us. We were singing.
Our album drops Christmas time 2021.
Yes. Taking this show on the road.
Yes. Frankie, I want you to be my alarm clock every day, because your energy is so fun and exciting, and I want your enthusiasm about life every day. How can people best connect with you?
Well,
why don't I sit you down again?
yeah, Darian's going to get me the chair. I mean, we've had people from the States, from Colombia on our body breath voice. Mind you, they had to get up incredibly early. People can just email me. That's the best. I mean, I'm no good at social media and all that stuff. I've got an old-fashioned talking computer without a screen. So really, I'm totally useless at social media. I think I do have an old Facebook somewhere, but and I'm just about to update my website because I had every workshop and every gig cancelled, of course, for the last year.
Yeah.
So I, hoping I've had my first jab. So I may even, come August, September, do some live teaching and gigs again. But for now, we do, and I'm actually going to. I'm thinking about it. I haven't written it up yet. I'm thinking of doing a workshop called Rewilding the Voice.
Ooh.
Just to really open it out to people just exploring, playing, and using sounds from different cultures. I've done a bit of experimenting of this, and it's just such fun not teaching the songs, but just exploring the extraordinary sounds that different cultures are able to produce, just playing with them.
Very cool. Well, we'll put your email in the show notes so that anyone wants to contact you to find out about workshops can get in touch with you.
Yeah, go to heartsneedart.org, click on the podcast link, and it'll all be there so you can connect with Frankie Armstrong. Frankie, thank you so much for being here.
Well, it's been an absolute joy.
You got Richard to sing.
I sang. Unmuted. Singing.
Yes, you did.
With a cat on my shoulder. Now that...
So proud of you.
What more could you want in a podcast? I don't know why else. It's worth tuning in for, I would say.
Well,
thank you, Frankie, so much.
Oh, well, as I say, it's been a total pleasure. And I certainly know that it's singing that keeps my energy, at my age, still able to kind of enthuse me in order to enthuse other people.
That's awesome.
I mean, I'm sure if you're listening, I'm sure you can hear it. If you're watching this podcast, I mean, one, it's a circus, but also you can also watch Frankie's enthusiasm. So I want to thank everyone for listening and watching. Make sure you subscribe wherever you watch or listen, and we will see you next week. Keep creating, everyone. Bye.
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 Thank you for listening to Arts for the Health of It, a podcast produced by Hearts Need Art, creative support for patients and caregivers, in partnership with the National Organization for Arts and Health. You can help others learn about the healing power of the arts by subscribing, sharing, and reviewing the podcast wherever you listen or watch. The podcast is hosted by Richard Wilmore, co-hosted by Constanza Rader, and produced by Ivan Briones. Our theme song, Songbird, is written and performed by Natalie Lane. Visit heartsneedart.org to learn how you can support our mission to create joy with people facing life-altering health challenges. Join us next week to learn more ways you can create arts for the health of it. The views expressed on this podcast do not necessarily reflect the views of Hearts Need Art, their staff, board members, or other affiliates. All content is created for informational purposes only. This podcast is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice or to diagnose and treat any health condition. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified health professional with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you heard on this podcast.